Okay, so our evolution of torts, and this is the last kind of case and tidbit before we get into intentional torts. And intentional torts is going to be a longer one, and after intentional torts, we're going to get into negligence, in which, as of this day, we are still learning. And so, and I will forever be learning. It's kind of a lot. But anywho, going into the exceptions of fault, okay? And so last time we brought up, was it Cohen versus Petty? That was the car case in which he didn't have any, he passed out. I feel sick tree. And because it wasn't foreseeable, it was unforeseeable, in that he had no prior reason or histories to suggest that it might happen, he wasn't at fault. Now, on that side, we're going to go on to kind of the other side of, well, you have exceptions to fault, but not here. And so you kind of think of it as like, okay, exceptions, and then the court says, whoa, actually, right here, we're going to draw a line. And so, kind of a line. And so, the takeaway here is that, well, abnormally dangerous events have strict liability. I said absolute liability, strict liability for damages. And the distinction there is that you may not necessarily be liable for the harm, but you're liable for what is damaged. And so you may incur costs, right? And so the case to illustrate this is going to be a case called Spano versus Perini. And Spano versus Perini, 1969. Keep in mind that the cases here, they don't necessarily show like this is the first time, right? They're just kind of used to illustrate a point here. I mean, before those cases were, the date did have significance, but I don't think that this is the first time it was introduced, right? But it does a good job of explaining this idea. Okay. Anywho, the facts of this case are that Perini Corps, I believe they're a construction company, maybe, I think, but regardless, they had planned an explosion for construction, right? And so they planned it, and when the explosion went off to kind of wreck a building, intentionally, was that it damaged the car of Spano. And worth noting that Spano wasn't the only one damaged. Not only that, but it wasn't actually debris that was the thing that damaged Spano's car. It was the sound waves. So the boom happened, and I think like the mirrors broke or something. But worth noting that it was 125 feet away. So, I mean, if you really think about it, that's like a decent distance. And so Spano and others sued Perini for, not negligence, but for damages, I believe. For damages, yeah. I don't think they wanted to sue for negligence, because I don't think they could. But anyway, the prior rule here was that, well, if it's debris, okay, and if it's debris, then they are liable for damages, and I think they're liable in general. Not my best video here. But, okay, the important part is that if there's no debris, but there is damages, then you need to provide proof of negligence if you're going to get them for fault of the act, okay? And so that, not going to go into, because that's a whole nother body of law that I still don't even have, or I don't have a good grasp on. But the big takeaway here is that if you're not going to get them for the very act and to get them for negligence. You can actually still get them for the responsibility for damages. That explosions, whether you planned it or not, right? Well, actually, even if you planned it, that they're still responsible for damages that incur. And so if you kind of think about it, right, this kind of imposes a greater duty in a way where if you know damages could be, right, you have a greater responsibility to kind of let other people know. But needless to say, all of this is to kind of illustrate where we started from strict liability all the way to some exceptions and carving out that, you know, there are exceptions to those exceptions as well. And so the next videos will go over intentional torts, and that's going to be a lot. So stay tuned.